There we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you're at. Hope it's a beautiful day. Hey, we got Keith Bromley back today, and we got a gentleman named Tim, which is a great name, by the way, Jones, uh, from ForeScout Technologies. And of course, Keith is with Keysight Technology. And of course, we got our famous host, Tony Fortunato. So we're going to have a great day. Let's talk about some compliance.
All righty. So compliance. Now, before we start, I'm gonna just go on a little bit of a rant and just chat a little bit. So Keith is a senior manager at Keysight Technologies, and Tim is a guy who works at ForeScout Technologies, director of system engineering. So both these guys have come together, which is kind of cool, and they're going to talk about compliance. Now, one of the interesting things was, I'll be honest with you, I've never been to the ForeScout website. Never been there. So I went, checked it out, and they've got some pretty interesting stuff. And a lot of it talks around this product called Counteract, which is kind of interesting. I won't steal Tim's thunder. I'm sure he'll cover a little bit of that. And then, of course, with Keith, Keysight, people may be familiar with some of the tools. What I found interesting was, I didn't even realize this. Agilent spun off Keysight back in 2014, which was kind of a news to me sort of thing. And what I liked about Keysight, the website is laid out very nicely for a vendor site, no offense intended. And what I like, they have some really interesting sections on trade-in section. If you want to find out, you want to trade in your stuff, what's it worth, that kind of thing. And then they have an eBay store where that's very interesting. I don't really see that too often. And then, of course, they have their free software trials as well. So I'll be honest with you, this one little episode forced me to go to both websites, and I was pleasantly surprised with both of them, because typically you go and there's a lot of fluff and there's not that much meat. And in this case, it kind of broke the mold. So good job, boys. And now moving on with Keith and Tim, I was just telling the guys before the show started, somebody was talking to me today, and I said, we're having a show on compliance. And the guy literally said to me, he said, I'm a network guy. What the heck do I care? And I'm going to start with what compliance means or how it relates to them, and I'll kick it off to Keith, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so that's one of the great things. We've been talking for a series of these podcasts here about, how can network visibility help network engineers? What is network visibility? What can you do with it? And there's all these different things out there: performance needs, troubleshooting, compliance, security. Well, it just so happens that visibility is an essential part of that. You can't fix what you can't see. You can't measure what you can't see. You're not going to understand what you can't see. And so it's all about getting network visibility, and that comes along and can help you out. In this case, we're going to talk about compliance. So like I've talked in the past about how taps give you access to the data you need. And then you can put in something called a network packet broker that lets you go in and filter the data, deduplicate it, and then distribute that onto your security and monitoring tools for further analysis of that data. Well, again, one of those areas is compliance. And so there's several things, and we're going to talk about that. But just to start it off, data masking, packet trimming, lawful intercept, even the refined capture of data to comply with certain specific international laws. Like there's a Turkish rule 5651 that concerns logging of data, especially for financial institutions. They have to do it under the law. Well, again, this is all relates to compliance, and this is how visibility can get in there and help you with that. But anyway, I'm going to pass it over to Tim, and
I got a quick one for you, Keith. Somebody just sent me a message, and they said, "What is the difference between a packet broker and a tap?" There's a good one for you.
That one's pretty simple. So a tap is just a device you insert into the network to capture data. So some people have used a span port off of like a Cisco switch in the past where it's a mirroring port. A tap is a special purpose device you insert it into the network. It's typically passive. You can do a little more active ones that are in line if you want a failover capability. But for a standard tap, it's a passive device. You insert it into the network. It makes a copy of the data, sends that out a monitoring port. Otherwise, the data continues on downstream unimpeded. All you've done is made a copy. And like I said, it's passive. So that simply replicates the data. And you want to put several of those out there in your network at the ingress, egress. and at certain key points in the middle of your network, as many as you need to get the data you need. But then you're going to have data coming in from 1, 2, 5, maybe even 10 or 20 taps, or you can even bring in data from span ports. And I know Tim O'Neill doesn't want me to say that, but you can do that. And so then you send it over to a network packet broker, which does aggregation of all these the data from these different points. It'll then do the filtering based upon IP address, VLAN, port tag, whatever you want criteria. And then it can then send specific data out, specific output ports to multiple tools. So you could send all the data to like 3 tools, part of the data to another tool, even another segment of the data to a 3rd, 4th, 5th tool. You can get really granular as to how you break that down.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to what you said. A tap gives you every bit, byte, nibble, octet, good or bad, interframe gap.
Yes.
It really gives you total visibility to your network. I don't dislike span for what it can do, but span does not give you visibility of your data. It can give you the IP addresses and, and it's not a real world thing. It's there. It'll give you some information, but it's the lowest priority inside of your switch, the absolute lowest priority. And so, and if you're trying to look at voice over IP or video over IP, real-time protocols, it is totally useless to use a span or a VACL for that reason, either one, because you're not getting everything.
Yeah, we've actually talked about that on a previous podcast. I mean, there is a lot of limitations around the span ports. It's not real-time data. Certain things do not get propagated along, especially on the layer 1, layer 2 part of it. Things can be missing. As Tim said, it's got lowest priority. So if the CPU is fully occupied, that's one of the first things going to get shed from the load. And then even if you look at a routing switch and all the data coming through it, and you try and send that out of one to 2 of the mirroring ports, you're not going to get everything out of there. So you got to pick and choose. Did you do the filters right? It's usually command line interface, a whole host of problems.
I mean, it has value, but it's not total visibility, period. There's no discussion. It's been proven. Tony's done experiments. I've done experiments. Chris Greer's done experiments. And we've shown beyond any shadow of a doubt that it's a great marketing tool by Cisco back in the late 90s. And that's what it really is. But it does have some viability. Now, since we've completely macerated that, let's turn it over to Tim Jones, who I will say, he's got more hair than I got, and he's a lot better looking. We won't go there. Okay. But
hey, thank you guys for letting me join the call today. This has been great. Just making sure everybody can kind of hear my microphone isn't muted or anything like that. Perfect. So again, thanks for letting me join. It's actually great. I've looked at a couple of the past presentations, so I'm excited to talk with you guys today a little bit about network visibility and the importance that network visibility has around a topic like compliance. A lot of people don't necessarily make that immediate correlation where the packets and bits and pieces are going to help me start to sew together a story around what's on my network and letting us know, hey, I've got new devices that have just shown up and I need to worry about things that maybe a compliance or an auditor would be asking about. How many of these do you have? How many of these types of systems do you have? It's not only the traffic itself that we may be looking for from a compliancy perspective, but even the hardware or software that could be running within the enterprise that we could see as part of that traffic, that we would be presented. So again, back to your span and taps and all the other, however the traffic shows up to a product like ForeScout, the concept being is there needs to be some way to kind of account for and know what all these pieces are. If we could know right away that those devices are not, supported or not compliant or shouldn't be on my network because it's passing a specific protocol, or I don't allow that level of protocol or those types of protocol, I think of something like a telnet, session or something really easy, low hanging a lot of times when I'm talking with groups. But there's all kinds of reasons why you'd have different ports and protocols in different parts of your environment, and they will probably drive you right back to some level of compliancy, whether you're a financial institution or a healthcare institution. There's probably some level of oversight or compliance that you're being asked about. Whether it's a laundry list of thou must do this and must do that if you're in the federal government or one of those entities, or something along the lines of, hey, you've got to protect personal information. We want to know what systems have access to it, what users are using those systems that have access to it, and getting that line of sight and getting it in real time. You need to have process and pieces in place that are going to get you that in real time. So,
hey Tim,
yeah.
Isn't it quite common for a company or a location to have several different levels of compliance? Like, for example, a hospital might have that HIPAA type of compliance angle to it, but then downstairs they may have a gift shop which may need to be more compliant on the retail side, and so on and so on. So you may find interwoven different layers of compliance that kind of wraps around the same company, right?
Oh, absolutely. Things that are processing data, that are healthcare related, maybe have to be put in a separate segment of your enterprise, right? We've got a firewall, we've got everything kind of blocked off. Well, I'm in kind of mode of, we go into hospital systems all the time, and the wireless infrastructure has medical devices hanging off of those, infrastructure. Knowing and seeing that in real time, that mistakenly was plugged up into the wrong port in the room, or somebody's brought in their, computer or laptop to work with somebody that's visiting the hospital system, and plugging that up to an enterprise, you want to know right away that those devices are connected, right? Getting that level of visibility so that you can see and understand, hey, wait a minute, that's not my managed asset, or that's not a device that I'm expecting to see there. I've got to take some kind of action and get that device moved as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
those are real-time problems that we're seeing.
Yeah, discover the rogue IT that can pop up here and there.
Yeah, and the mixed processing you asked a little bit about, you absolutely hit it on the mark. There are groups that have, one flat network, and they're trying to do all these different things within it, right? They're processing credit card information. They're shipping PII out to different locations. There may be other requirements around some of this data. Knowing kind of what devices are connecting up to those pieces of the network, and building kind of a plan around the architecture becomes kind of critical, right? Understanding that I need to maybe do some level of segmentation and understand how the traffic is flowing. And I know you guys have talked about that in some of your previous discussions. It's critical in those kind of environments, right? You have to have systems that are watching the traffic and understand how to break out different parts of that traffic so that they understand, hey, I need to make sure that this type of information, because I've got a system over here that's passing encrypted data, or doing this, processing of credit card information, or sending healthcare information, is being kind of monitored and watched. And I don't have 50 of them. I've got, 52 of them. Well, wait a minute, where did the other 2 come into the play, and who's running those, additional assets? So those are critical questions.
When you say PII, I had someone send me an email not too long ago saying I didn't understand an acronym. So let's tell them what PII is so they understand.
Sure. So it's personal identifiable information. So it could be a variety of different things. It could be somebody's date of birth, or their social security number, maybe their mother's maiden name. Those are types of information that are usually protected. They're held at at a personal level. A lot of times, unfortunately, that information is seen in clear text in some systems. And when we see that type of information, somebody may want to throw a flag up and say, hey, you probably shouldn't be sharing this information off of this system, because you're in the lobby network, right? You're in the environment that doesn't have any other types of protection around it.
You mean that the coffee shop data may be compromised?
Right.
It's totally secure, right?
Oh yeah. I believe that. I'm sorry.
As far as that PII, so one thing is to make sure that the information doesn't get out there. But if a lot of these tools and some applications are going to need the information, so data masking, as I mentioned earlier, this was a perfect segue into that, is one of the functions that you want to do. You want to mask, like a credit card, mask all 16 digits, or maybe you just want to mask the first 12, leave the last 4 so you can sort on it, or maybe you unmask the first digit if you want to do some sort of analysis of what types of credit cards or something that are being used on the network. But the point is, you're going to want some sort of data masking typically, and a packet broker or some other solution like that can come in and do very cost effectively can provide some of that capability for you to help secure the integrity of your compliance data.
Yeah, I think I want to add in here that just yesterday I got an email from a friend of mine, and according to one of the more recent studies, absolutely 100% of banking applications used on Androids and Apples has been hacked. It is not safe. And about 78% of the United States bank applications on your PC have also been breached in some way, shape, or form. And in Europe, I think the number there was 92%. So that's even more reason to start monitoring and looking at your real data and having that capability.
Now, I want to just change gears a little bit, go back to compliance, because my background, I worked at a large bank in Canada. I was actually director for a while as well. And I find that with compliance, there's typically there's a disconnect somewhere where you'll have the general rule of compliance to say, for example, as you said, you've got a wireless access point and it's used for X, and people shouldn't have their phones and stuff on it for whatever reason. But I find that the technical people don't really know or understand compliance for that network, that area, that department, that building, that whatever, and they do what they do best to get things to work, and they unknowingly make things non-compliant, or they cause an issue. And I think what I always struggle with, because I do have a background in it, when I'm walking around, I always kind of keep my eyes open, and I just casually mention things to my customer if I'm doing something, politely make them aware of, clear text or whatever they're doing. But I don't think the average technical person has that type of direction, knowledge, or reference to say, hey, you should be doing that, right? Or I love this one. We're just doing this quick install, but we're going to come back and fix it and change it. They're not going to do that. So, there's that huge disconnect that I find all the time in the field, and I have yet to find a way to deal with it effectively.
Yeah. No, we've absolutely, I'm in complete, adamant agreement. What we see a lot of times, or the conversation that we'll have, is that somebody's put together some level of policies, whether it's a security policy or kind of a standard operating procedure for your, anybody from the clerk at the banking level, or from a nurse or something like that that's walking the floors in the hospital system, to an employee that's part of your internal trusted organization. You may sign a piece of paper that says, I'm not going to charge my iPhone on this piece of computer, or I'm not going to, do all these types of things. But that's not how reality is, right? Things change. You put all the best kind of protection out there in terms of, a statement or a policy that the organization may follow. It's usually linking that back to kind of real world practical technology that's going to help you do something about it. What could prevent it? When I know about something, can I take some kind of action to remediate the situation or correct that action as quickly as possible? Sometimes it's just simple hygiene. It's, hey, we don't allow for those types of devices to connect to this segment of the wireless network, right? This SSID is protected, and only these trusted assets or these type of assets are allowed to connect to those specific pieces. It runs the course, right? I mean, but at the end of the day, it's the same problem. It's, hey, we put something in place, we built a system. The system may be, a few weeks old, it may be a few years old. And now, as things have evolved, the design that went in and the architecture that went into that system, what's being, how are we reevaluating that system to make sure it's still operating the way it was? Do we have a sense of what kind of assets are out there and what's connected? And then looking at it, does that map back to what we've certified? I said that I had these types of systems in my enterprise, whether it's a Linux server or database services, or whatever that looked like when I built it. Is that still the level of compliancy and still the level of trust that my system's operating at? So that's where we start to look at kind of like, how do I get that real-time data about what's happening in the network. We like to say, if you want to know something about what's going on the network, let's ask that network to start sending some of that information to a tool, that we support in ForeScout. It's really critical to understand that's the kind of modeling that everybody has to start to look at, because everything changes so fast, right? You've got, here's my old video camera, here's this, here's that. Some of it I'm still using, some of it I don't even know that I still have in my network, right? Do I still have that TV that I bought 3 years ago that I hooked up to my wireless network? Is it still connected to my wireless network? Most people don't know, right? Most companies don't know, and at the really large level, most enterprises don't know, right? They've let these engineers work through their process of getting things stood up. Like you said, hey, we'll come back and fix this. We'll take off those blank username and passwords, or those default password accounts, and they never do.
I was going to say, do you find that there's a lot of tools out there you just statically run and take a snapshot in time and it does a compliance report? I've used many of them, and they're okay. You use them once, you use them twice, you scare people into understanding that their network's not secured or not compliant and all that good jazz. Some of them give you recommendations on what to do, all that good stuff. But I find that these static tools, though, after the initial intention and novelty wears away, they sit on a shelf. They become shelfware. So right. I'm a bigger proponent of having systems that run continuously or automatically or at an interval and spit out reports or spit out alerts or tell you to do something kind of automatically, right?
Yep.
Proactive.
Go ahead, Tim.
No, I was just going to say proactive devices, something that's, Keith said it early on, if you're not looking at your network, number one, you don't understand your network. It's a neurological system. It's electronic neurological system. You have to understand its subtleties, its uniqueness, its current values. But as Tony pointed out, most people don't have a clue. They fix things. They put a Band-Aid on something. And so compliance is a much higher issue than, I think I'll look at my network today and see if it's compliant. It has to be proactive. It can't be something that I'll visit next month if I get a break.
Right. Now, so the other thing is we're all engineers here. So, you put this tool in there that can do the constant monitoring, but we know we're not all going to sit there and monitor, right? We've got other things we've got to do. So what's a good rule of thumb to come back and look at that and look at the monitoring effort? Is it once a week? Is it once every 2 weeks? Once a month? You know what I'm getting at, right? You can't do it 24/7 by 365.
Yeah, no, I mean, surprisingly enough, a lot of people do. But the reality, from most agencies is there needs to be some level of reevaluation. Am I seeing the entirety of my network that I'm trying to look at, right? Whether I'm a small manufacturer or whether I'm a healthcare or I'm a group of stores or something like that, there needs to be some level of reevaluation that I'm mapping back. I think that's part of the compliancy question, right? Whether it's an annual ring the bell, like, hey, let's go ahead and put our hands out and touch every piece of our asset. That's very much like a clipboard mentality. What we've at least aspired to and talked with a lot of customers about is that things are moving so fast. The level of acquisitions that happen from company to company, the level of, hey, these things are all out in the enterprise and they're swept up and they're all gone. They no longer touch our network. Well, wait a minute, what happened to all those assets? Things happen so fast that you have to have some level of continuous monitoring in place. You have to have tools that are going to look at things all the time, right? When the technicians all leave and the help desk leaves and, you've got everybody kind of moved away, somebody has to be accounting for and recording what's going on in the enterprise. Why is that Tim Jones guy logging into his system, at Sunday morning at 4:30 in the morning, right? Wait a minute, he's not here. He has no rights to be in those systems. Those are the kind of things that we're expecting tools today to be able to look and see the traffic happen, be able to report that information in and tell us that those devices are online and in that real time, and then be able to, ultimately take some kind of action at some point, right? Whether it's, fire off a few emails or whether it's actually take some kind of network level access control. Those are the kind of things that we're dealing with in real time with some of these customers.
Yeah, breaches are not on a schedule, by the way.
Yeah.
We wish they were, but they're not.
Neither is stupidity.
Pardon me?
Neither is stupidity.
Oh, no, stupidity is high on that list. But, I mean, people, you know, a friend of mine, Tom Tosh, once said that a network is like a person. You know, if you go to a doctor, it doesn't matter what you go in for. They're going to take your temperature. They're going to listen to your heart. They're going to feel your pulse. In my case, they marvel at the fact that I'm still alive. And, you know, that's what a network is. All the networks I've worked on all my life are that way. They're like, they're living and breathing, and you get used to that living and breathing. In the really old days, we would hook up a speaker, believe it or not, an amplifier and speaker, and we would hear the data going back and forth. The brr, 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 and you got to where if all of a sudden that was not normal, you're like, what the heck's going on?
Right.
You know? And of course, that's ancient history. Okay. None of you were even born when I did that. So, but you have to understand your network. And the only way you can do that is to get visibility, get access. And Keith, you asked a great question. How often do we do this? You know, if I was in charge of a network and data and the chance that someone was going to have to I was going to put on my resume that I got fired because I allowed a major breach of 100 million people, I think I'd have policies, procedures, and I'd be very, very proactive. Okay. I don't know if there's an answer.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just wondering because, you know, it's for the organizations that aren't real large and they don't have a dedicated person, you know, you got to have some sort of mixture there. But to your point, it really comes back, in my opinion, to three things. You know, you've got to have your initial set of policies and procedures. You've got to come back periodically to update those. You've got to put the right architecture into place that'll get the right data, do what you want to the data, whether, like I said, it's mask the data, or if it's go through and you don't need the packet payload sent to a tool, slice that out, trim it out, and just send the headers. Or if you need to direct all the information from a certain IP address to, a copy of it to a port for law enforcement, whatever. But you got to have that architecture in place, and then you send it on to the specific purpose-built monitoring tools that are going to look at the data for compliance, do their continual updates, and, you know, take that, and it's got to be a continual process on all three of these portions of the.
Yeah, the speed that we're seeing, unfortunately, the attack surfaces happen at, and the speed that the detection needs to take place when you have a rogue endpoint that comes into the enterprise, you have to have that just almost immediate notification to systems and tools so that they can, you know, help you get, you know, those systems either off the network or remediated or put in some kind of penalty box that, you know, are going to keep them at bay so you can go back in and get that, you know, taken care of. That's where we're seeing, you know, the breaches take place, you know, as fast as they can. Those, you know, endpoints are compromised, bing, 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 bing. And, you know, as they start to move laterally through an organization, it gets pretty rapid. But there's a way to stop some of those things. You got to get visibility as soon as something turns sideways, or something stops acting the way it's supposed to. You need a mechanism to be able to make that flip.
Yeah, Tony and I were joking. I had a guy call me up from a relatively small company and say, I think someone's in my network that's not supposed to be in there. What do I do? What do I do? I said, well, start off with unplugging that little cable to the network. Okay.
Right.
That's the start. If you don't have the right people, unplug, send everybody for a long lunch, call in an analyst or someone that can help you, but don't sit there twiddling your thumb thinking, oh my gosh, what do I do? I'm going to go out and Google it, or I'm going to be proactive. If it doesn't look right, I joke about it, but I don't know if you can see here. This is my network security device. It's an AB switch. When I'm through working in my office downstairs, I hit that. All of my Wi-Fi's are turned off down here. They're actually physically removed from these computers because I do some security work. But when I'm through, I push this. It's the end of it. I'm through.
Has it got a speaker in it?
No. Smart ass. But so you brought up something else, Keith, Tony, and one of the things you brought
I just want to just finish the talk with just a quick example of what just happened 2 weeks ago. I was at a fairly large company, and everything's locked down, quote unquote, all this good stuff, and they're on the trusted network. And I was explaining to them in a conference room how it doesn't take much to compromise a network. And they really didn't buy much of what I was saying. They thought I was trying to get my foot in the door to get more work. And I said, listen, you got to understand something. I'm not a security guy, and this is what's really scary. So I went to a computer, a laptop in the conference room that they had wired in, and I typed 4 commands at the command prompt, and I effectively turned that laptop into a hotspot.
Oh, God.
And basically, I just took my phone and I connected to the SSID that I just created. And don't worry, it had WPA2 security on it, so everything's good for me, the bad guy. And I got in through the laptop, through the network. And they said, well, you can't get to the internet. I said, I don't need to. Why would I want to go out? I'm in.
That's right.
So that kind of, made them kind of lift up an eyebrow. And they said, well, not everybody can do that. I said, that's not the point. Right? This is not I said, the point is that you feel that you've got all the angles covered, and that's when you're most vulnerable, is when you think you've got it all covered. So that was just a little example that I wanted to share with you, because it doesn't really take much for anybody, intentionally, unintentionally, whatever the case may be, to make you non-compliant or make a risk or create a liability on your network. That's all.
All you got to do is ask an 8-year-old how to breach a network. They can probably teach you pretty quickly, especially a Wi-Fi.
Great.
All right, guys. Well, it's half an hour. We don't want to keep people too long. If anybody has any closing comments, now's the time to do it. Keith?
Well, basically, like I said, it starts with the process procedures, the architecture, and then the purpose-built equipment. So make sure you look at all 3, and you do it on a continual basis. That's what we've talked about here. It's not once and done. It's once and repeat, rinse and repeat over and over and over.
Cool. And Tim?
Yeah, I was going to say, very much echo that same sentiment. You got to keep going back and back and back. Know thy network, and when something changes, you have to have something in place that's going to tell you right away that you've got a new class of devices that just connected, or a single device that you used to trust is no longer trusted. That's where compliance is going to, the crossroad of compliancy and networking is going to start.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. And Tim Sr., any closing words of wisdom, my friend?
If you don't know what you're doing, call for an expert.
And there you go.
But
well, thanks for joining us, folks.
Key, gang. I'm sorry, Tony. I was going to say visibility is always the key. But if you don't know what you're doing, call Keith, call Tim, call Tony, call someone that can help you, because there's no small penalties anymore.
There you go. All right, folks. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you at the next show. And I want to thank my guests, and have yourself a good day and stay safe.